Welcome back to another episode of the Unforgotten Project. If you're new here, I'll give you a quick rundown. We cover all missing children cases. If you want to help out, all you gotta do is like, share, comment, and subscribe. It's free. Let's dive into this case. On the morning of June 25th, 1983, 4-year-old Nyleen Marshall was enjoying what should have been a perfect summer day with her family in the Montana's beautiful mountains. But within a matter of minutes, she vanished without a trace. Despite one of the largest search efforts in Montana's history, thousands of volunteer hours, FBI involvement, and countless theories, no one has ever found out what happened to her. More than 4 decades later, the disappearance of Nyleen remains one of America's most haunting missing child cases. This is her story. Nyleen was born 1979 and lived with her family in Montana, and by all accounts she was bright and an energetic little girl who loved spending time outdoors. June 25, 1983, Nyleen's family traveled to Elkhorn Mountains about 25 miles southeast of Helena, Montana, for a picnic and a hike. The area is known for breathtaking scenery, dense forests, rocky terrain, and windy trails. Several family members were together that day, including Nyleen's mother, stepfather, siblings, and other relatives. Nothing seemed unusual. The children played with the adults, prepared food, and enjoyed the afternoon. At one point, Nyleen walked a short distance up the trail with 2 older children, according to reports. She soon turned around and began walking back toward the picnic area alone. It was a walk of only a few hundred yards. She never arrived, and when family members realized that they couldn't find her, panic set in almost immediately. Everyone began searching the nearby woods, calling her name, and unfortunately, they got no answer. As minutes passed, they knew something was wrong. Authorities was notified, launching what became one of the most largest search operations Montana has ever seen. Hundreds of volunteers joined the local law enforcement. The search quickly expanded. Search and rescue teams combined the forests, tracking dogs were brought in also. Helicopters searched from above. Mounted search teams covered miles of rugged terrain. The National Guard even assisted. The search continued for weeks. Investigators searched abandoned mines, streams, cliffs, caves, and even dense forests. They hoped Nyleen had become simply lost. But no clothing, no footprints, no remains. Nothing belonging to the little girl was ever found. Search dogs reportedly followed her scent, but only a short distance before losing it completely. Some investigators believe this suggested she may have entered a vehicle. Others would argue the mountainous terrain simply made tracking impossible. Either way, there were almost no physical clues. As investigators tried to piece together what happened, several possible explanations would emerge. The first was the simplest. Perhaps Nyleen had wandered off into the wilderness and succumbed to the elements. The Elkhorn Mountains are rugged, steep, and heavily wooded. A young child could quickly become disoriented. Wildlife, changing weather, and difficult terrain would have made survival extremely difficult even for an adult. However, many investigators questioned this theory. The search was incredibly thorough. Hundreds of trained volunteers searched the area repeatedly. If Nyleen had died nearby, many believed some evidence should eventually have become discovered. Yet decades later, nothing has ever been found. Another theory is a little bit stranger. Some witnesses reported seeing an unidentified man near the trail around the time Nyleen disappeared. Descriptions varied, but investigators never conclusively identified him. Could someone have abducted Nyleen? This possibility gained more attention years later because of a mysterious series of letters. In the beginning of 1985, a man identifying himself only as Tony mailed several letters to authorities. The letters claimed that Nyleen was alive. According to the writer, he had kidnapped her because he wanted to raise a child of his own. He described loving her as his own daughter and claimed they were living somewhere in the United States. The letters included details about Nyleen that were not widely publicized, causing investigators to take him seriously. However, there was a problem. The writer never revealed his identity. He never provided enough information to verify his claims. Despite years of investigation, authorities could never determine whether the letters were genuine or simply an elaborate hoax. The FBI became heavily involved. Investigators analyzed the handwriting. They tracked every possible lead connected to the letters. One suspect eventually attracted attention. A convicted child kidnapper named Franklin Delano Floyd became a possible person of interest. Floyd had an extensive criminal history involving child abduction and identity fraud. Some investigators believed similarities existed between the crimes and the anonymous letters. However, no evidence ever linked Floyd directly to Nyleen's disappearance. Authorities have never officially named him as her kidnapper. That theory remains speculative. Another possible suspect emerged after witnesses recalled seeing a man driving near the recreation area on the day Nyleen disappeared. Unfortunately, descriptions were vague. No vehicle was ever identified with certainty. Without physical evidence, investigators had little to work with. Like so many missing child cases from the early 1980s, the lack of modern technology severely limited investigators. There were no cell phones, no surveillance cameras, no DNA databases as we know them today. If someone had abducted her, they may have left almost no trace. As years have passed, the investigation still continued. Age-progressed images were released to show what Nyleen might look like as a teenager and later as an adult. Investigators followed countless tips from across the country. Many turned out to be dead ends, some were outright hoaxes. Others simply couldn't be verified, but still, the case was never closed. The FBI continuously declassified Nyleen Marshall as a missing child, and investigators have repeatedly stated that they remain open to new information. Perhaps the most heartbreaking part of this story is the impact on her family. For decades, they lived without answers. Families of missing children often describe living in a constant state of uncertainty. Unlike cases and confirmed deaths, there's no final goodbye. There's always hope, but also constant heartbreak. Nyleen's family has spent more than 40 years carrying that burden. Today, the mystery remains unsolved. Did Nyleen become lost in the Montana wilderness? Was she abducted by a stranger? Were the mysterious Tony letters genuine confessions or cruel hoaxes? Without new evidence, investigators simply don't know. What makes this case so haunting is that almost every theory has significant unanswered questions. She became lost. Why was nothing ever found? If she was abducted, who was responsible? Why were there so few witnesses? And if the anonymous letters were real, who wrote them? Cases like Nyleen remind us how quickly a normal day can become a lifelong mystery and heartache. One moment, a family was enjoying a picnic in the mountains. Minutes later, a little girl has disappeared forever. More than 40 years have passed, but investigators continue that hope that somewhere, that someone knows something and will come forward. Even one forgotten memory, one old photograph, or one long-held secret that could finally provide the answers her family was waiting decades to hear. Until then, Nyleen Marshall remains one of Montana's most heartbreaking unsolved missing child cases, and her disappearance continues to puzzle investigators 40 years later.